Welcome to the Cabin Culture Podcast, where we spend a little more time diving deeper into all the fun parts of cabin culture. We like to think of this as both the material and imagined expressions of how cabin lovers, dwellers, builders, and designers wish to live a more simple and authentic life. On this episode, I'm talking with Meredith Ewenson, a nature advocate, group travel planner, content creator, and a whole lot more. She's been in the marketing, PR, social media space for 15 years, as well as a yoga and meditation teacher for over 10 years. She works to share the benefits of getting outdoors and practicing mindfulness in nature. And today we're going to talk about all of this. Basically, we have an entire conversation about cabin culture that doesn't involve any cabins, but does involve ways to integrate cabin culture into your daily life to reduce stress and increase your consistent connection with nature. Thanks for joining us, and here we go. So Meredith, it's so exciting. We've been talking about this for ages, and here you are. You're on the podcast. We are doing it.
Yes, I am so happy to sit with you and chat. It feels like old friends, even though we've never talked face to face. So this is fun. I'm excited.
So this is interesting because you're one of few folks that we've had on the podcast who do not actually have a cabin. So often we're talking about the build process, the hosting, all of that good stuff. Today is going to be a little bit different. I'm actually really excited for this because sometimes I think we get distracted by all of those pieces. Obviously, they're essential when you want a cabin, but we forget why we wanted to build a cabin in the first place. So I'm hoping that today is a little bit more about that culture piece and the nature piece and all of that, which you are a little bit of an expert in. So Can you start by telling us more about what you do?
Sure. Yeah, my name is Meredith. I like to say that I'm a nature advocate. I am someone who encourages and loves to inspire and help people get outdoors, whether that is to a cabin somewhere remote or in their own neighborhood, somewhere that they can enjoy that maybe they've overlooked because they've been told or they've thought that they need to go deep into the wilderness to really experience nature. So really everything that I share, everything that I love to connect with people on is that piece of nature. And I think cabins have also been such a huge part of that for me. I was actually a few months ago, totally separate before we even started talking, I wrote down a list of all of the different cabins, tree houses, yurts, all of the different types of off-grid style accommodation that my husband and I have adventured to over the years. And there have been in the past 10 years, maybe 25 different cabins, huts, and things like that. And it's just always been a part of the way I like to enjoy the outdoors and how I like to travel. So I'm super excited for this.
Yeah, that was a great introduction. There's two things that really stood out to me. One of them I want to dive into more, but one I just want to acknowledge, which is I do think a lot of us in the cabin world, it starts with this connection to nature and desire to slow down and escape. And our first instinct is we have to go far away. We have to build a cabin. We have to travel somewhere. And even when I ask the question, what makes a cabin, so many people say it has to be a certain distance away from your house. So it's so interesting what you're saying about actually for some of this benefit, you can do it in your own neighborhood or your own town or even just nearby. It doesn't have to be an escape necessarily.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's so many benefits to connecting to nature. And for me, it's really it's the mindfulness piece. It's being aware and intentional of the time that you're spending. It's not how hard it is to get to. It's not how challenging the place was to hike to. It really is just a practice in connecting to the natural world around you as a way to just feel really grounded and good within yourself. And cabins are such a great way to do that because they do encourage that sense of slowing down, maybe turning off your devices. And maybe if you do live somewhere that's not super deep into nature, cabins are often situated even energetically and aesthetically in a way that encourages that. So yeah, I'm such an advocate for exploring nature in any way, shape, or form. So yeah.
I really like that mindset shift because right now I'm in my office in Durham, North Carolina, which is a city. You can probably hear it, but there's helicopters outside. There's a huge truck unloading food across the street. So it does feel for me hard to find that calm. And part of my desire to build a cabin and now to go to the cabin is that even just planning it, when I book the trip, I can feel a little bit of a release of the stress. And then when we're on our way there, it's so hard to explain we're like driving through the night at like 3 a.m. and I still feel in a happy place because I know where I'm going. So can you give some examples of what I or others might be able to do locally? Like, how
Yes.
do you do that on the day to day?
Okay. So there's a few things. Number one, the most simple thing is you can literally just have an awareness that you need to connect to something in nature and like look out your window, find something green, look at the clouds in the sky and take a deep breath. And that also goes for people who like maybe aren't super mobile, don't have the ability to like get up and walk. You can literally look out your window and have that intentional mindful connection with nature and take a couple breaths. If you're able to go a step further, you could take a walk around the block. I have this concept that I call the pigeon on the power line. And it just came to me one day when I noticed a pigeon on a power line. I realized like that is me connecting to nature. A pigeon sitting on a power line is a moment of connection in nature. So now every time I see a pigeon on a power line, which I also live in like a small city, there's power lines everywhere, there's sharp pigeons everywhere. It reminds me to take a pause, to stop, to take a deep breath and really feel grounded for that moment. And that might take all of 1 second, 2 seconds. It doesn't take a lot of time. And it's not something that like anyone around you needs to even know that you're doing. It's just something that like when you go out to your car and you're about to open the door, you might just glance up for a second and see, look up and notice if there's any birds on. And I say power line, but maybe it's on a fence, maybe it's on a house, whatever. It's those little touch points and moments of connecting to nature that then begin to build and compound over time so that every time you step outside, every time you see a bird or a power line or a building, you start to then like really build this mindfulness practice for yourself that started from something so silly and simple. But it's a way that you can tap into that feeling of groundedness and relaxation and lowering your stress at any time, no matter where you are. So obviously there's other things, you can do as well. There's tons of practices and things you can do in nature, but those are a couple starting points I like to share with people just so everyone's aware that they can do it. They can do it anywhere. There are no barriers to entry. Like nature is all around us. It's just a matter of kind of being aware of it. And then you begin to build that gratitude of having it around you. And it just really like begins to sort of expand from there.
It feels my visual brain is almost viewing it as this like scale, right? Where like on one end is build your own cabin in the woods and you get to escape there whenever you want, right? On the very other end is pigeon on a power line. And then in between is everything from like finding a park to walk in, going on a
Yes.
hiking trip, renting a cabin for a week, all the way to building your own. And it doesn't have to be like you're working your way up. It can be all of these, even if you already own a cabin. Still,
Mhm.
when you're not there, how do you think about these things?
Exactly. I think for me at one point, because I live in Rhode Island, I live on the coast in Rhode Island. It's a beautiful place to live. I grew up in downtown Chicago, so I have not always been like a nature immersive person. I mean, there are definitely like some clues from my childhood that I think kind of linked me into enjoying nature and wildlife and things like that. But I don't live in the middle of the woods, and I don't know that I particularly want to. But it's really like for me, I had a few moments of kind of that FOMO of being like, oh, I wish I could be there, or I wish I could experience that mountain, or that person lives somewhere where they can experience XYZ type of nature all the time. And it occurred to me that like that's my choice to have that perspective. And so when I kind of reframed what I thought about nature and the value of nature, I really made it a point and a practice to go explore in my local area and find those places that make me feel really good and like continue to explore them. And the more like there's a few, nature preserves and beaches and things that I go to all the time. And every time I go, it's different. The sunrise is different. The sunset is different. The wildlife are different. The plants look different. There's different stages of life throughout the year. So I think it's also a practice of like, of sort of getting more nuanced and granular with like your connection to whatever it is around you, and less about like, okay, I need to check off that over there, this over here. Like, well, what about what's around you and what does it look like every day this week at the same time? It might be totally different. So yeah, that's kind of for me something that was a big light bulb moment was it was my choice to begin to really enjoy and not have that FOMO with what I have around me, because there's so much to be grateful for. And I love it now. Now it's like my favorite thing is to wake up for sunrise, which can be really early sometimes, and go to the beach and just like look around and notice what I notice. And to me, that's like my favorite way to start the day and feel really grounded. I feel more creative, feel more inspired. Like there's so many benefits.
I feel like I'm having the light bulb moment right now that you had, because what I'm realizing is I definitely, whenever I'm not at the cabin, I have that FOMO. Whenever I'm scrolling Instagram and looking at people hiking or being outside or whatever, I have that FOMO. And what it's almost done is make that like the cabin is the place where I can de-stress, but that almost allows me to then go into a place of hyper stress when I'm at home, because my brain is like, well, if this is the place of no stress, then this is the place of all of the stress. And
Mm-hmm.
so I don't notice those things at home. Whereas when I'm at the cabin, I'll sit in the loft and like look out the windows at the trees or sit in the hot tub and just like pay attention to all those small details. But at home, I don't, because I'm just like, work, 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 get stuff done, you know? And so this is
Yes.
like really opening my mind to like, okay, I don't have to give up all of that when I come home. And actually, it might be
No.
really unhealthy to entertain all of that when I'm here.
Totally. I had someone once on Instagram say to me, like, I wish I lived somewhere as beautiful as you. And I was
Mm.
like, I don't live somewhere more beautiful. I just look at it more beautifully. I just enjoy it more beautifully. I just pay attention to it in a way that you might not be paying attention to your area. And guess what? I felt the same way you felt before. I just made a decision to look at things differently. So, like, here's a practice that I would recommend for you or anyone who's like, yeah, me too. I'm totally stressed at home. And then I like live for vacation or the weekend or whatever.
Yes. Yes.
Get it? Okay. I totally get it also, because I'm definitely the person who loves to have like some trips, some travel, some vacations planned to look forward to. So I totally get it. So what I would do is, when you're at the cabin, or for anyone listening who might have a place they love to go or they're excited to go, what is the feeling you feel when you're there? Like, what is that feeling? Identify what that feeling is. Like, sit with it, journal with it, think about it, whatever, it might just come to mind. And what in your everyday life, wherever your regular home is and your regular life, what can you find and what can you do there that you can connect to that same feeling? So
Yeah.
so let's say that feeling is like the feeling of being grounded. You know, if you're at the cabin and you just feel grounded, you just feel settled, you just feel relaxed, you feel at peace. What are elements in your everyday life that you can connect to? They already exist. They are there. What are some elements you can connect to that will help you feel grounded and relaxed and settled and connected? Like, what are those? And again, it might just be like walking out into the little patch of grass you might have on your front sidewalk with your bare feet. It might be looking up at the sky, you know, set an alarm once a day at noon to go like look at the clouds and take a deep breath. And it seems really silly and it seems almost so trite, like that wouldn't be effective, but like it is. Like over
Yeah.
time, when you have those little practices, it blends into your everyday life. Like it becomes less like a task and more of like just how you live. And it's when you sort of cross that threshold that you're like, oh, I can access these feelings that I desire to be connected to all the time, anytime that I want. Maybe not in the middle of a stressful meeting, but like before or after for sure.
That's right. If you know you have a stressful meeting, planning that time. I'm thinking the thing at the cabin that is for more of my senses, the like most overwhelming thing is fire. And it's the wood stove inside and the campfire outside. And it's the like visual, just watching it is a little bit what's the right word? Like hypnotizing. And then the
Mm-hmm.
smell of it is amazing. And then the warmth of it feels really good, right? Because cozy is like, you know, if I had a master's degree, it would be, well, actually I do, but my preferred master's would be in like being cozy. And we just installed a wood stove at home. And this last week, Sean
Ooh.
and I have both commented how we're becoming hobbits, because now I leave work and I go home and it's not quite nature. So maybe I'm not all the way there, but it does connect me to that feeling that I have when I'm at the cabin.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that. I love that. And that is something I truly wish I had in my house, actually. And I have like tried to strategize all these different ways to put a wood fire in my house. I don't think it's going to happen, but you find it in the ways that you can. You know, we can't
Yeah.
have every single thing, but I mean, fire is an element. I definitely think that's connecting to nature. And
Yeah.
if it evokes that feeling that you feel when you're in nature, when you're at the cabin, like that is like, that's it. That's it for you, is
Yeah.
you have the fireplace. That's so awesome. I love it.
And before the wood stove, we would not wash our clothes when we came home from the cabin
Yeah.
to keep the fire smell in them as long as we could. I would even like not shower my hair because it would stay in my hair. But now
Totally.
we can actually shower when we get home because we just light a
Yeah.
fire in the wood stove and it's there.
Oh, I
Okay,
love
this
it.
is such good advice. Now I want to go back to the first thing you said, which was just all of your travels with your husband and I think otherwise how many cabins and spaces that you've been to. That takes me back to like where cabin culture started for you. And you mentioned it wasn't
Yeah.
your whole life. Was there a moment or a trip or when was that switch flipped for you?
I don't know if I have like one moment. I have thought about this a lot. So I grew up in downtown Chicago. My parents are city people. They work in hospitality, like not nature people. We did not camp. We did not hike. Like my form of nature, growing up were the city parks, which in Chicago, Lincoln Park is I
Mhm.
love going there. It's so beautiful. Um, but for a lot of people, that is kind of nature light. And like the zoo, like those were my kind of nature experiences. I knew I loved them and I was connected to them, but like that was kind of the extent of it. And I would say it's probably like when I started dating my husband. He's very outdoorsy. I also like grew up sailing in high school and college, and that got me on the water, which is obviously a different form. It is a form of nature and being outdoors. But I think when him and I started kind of traveling, a lot of it was camping and finding these like little places like this tree house. So, okay, the very first, I think, cabin that I ever went to was Nick and I lived in Charleston, South Carolina. This is back in like 2010. This is pre Instagram. Okay. So I heard of this place, word of mouth. It was literally word of mouth. I think I went to their website if they had one, or maybe I found a phone number and called them. And it was this outfitter place that has a few tree houses on the Edisto River in South Carolina. And you basically park, they give you a canoe, you hand them your car keys, and they drive your car to all the way at the very end. And you take your canoe like 7 miles to the tree house. And this
Like
is
you
like,
canoe to the
you
treehouse.
canoed to the treehouse, and the map was literally, I kid you not, it was like printer paper with Sharpie. It was like X marks the spot. Okay. It's like you're going to go about a few hours and you'll see it on your right. And then you stay there for however many nights and then canoe another like 7 miles, and your car with the car keys will be there, and just like, clean out the canoe and leave it in like the thing, next to the put in or whatever. And why we did this, I don't quite remember, but I found it so exciting and fascinating to do this little like adventure. And this was over Thanksgiving. So we also tend to kind of have a habit of like going over holidays to like kind of nature focused trips and
Yeah.
stuff like that. And it literally felt like we were in like Apocalypse Now, like going down the river. If you've ever been to South Carolina on like the rivers, it's like very jungly. We didn't see any alligators, but there are some. It was like kind of
Did you
creepy,
hear
but in
any
a very cool
banjos?
way. Did not hear any banjos, but there was this one weird situation where all of a sudden we were canoeing down the river, and I swear to God, like at least 50 beagles come running to the bank and are like barking at us. I'd like to think maybe it was like a nice breeder or something. I hope it wasn't like a bad one, but there were like all these hunting dogs. They were like beagles, and they were barking at us on the bank of the river. That's like literally the only thing we saw over like 3 days and however many miles on this river. But it was just like the adventure of it is what I love so much. And for me, sometimes getting off the grid. So also going places that like there might not be Wi-Fi or there's not a television or whatever, you have the opportunity to really immerse in the experience and the nature around you. This treehouse had like a two burner and a couple pots and pans. I think we made like sausage and peppers for Thanksgiving dinner. Like it was something like super basic. But that was like, I think my first kind of cabin in that type of way experience. And I,
That's
I,
not a
I
beginner
love it so
cabin
much.
experience. That's
No,
like I've never canoed to a cabin that I've gone to. I feel like
I
I've pulled up
haven't
in my
since.
car.
Yeah, I have not since. And it was pretty chill. It was like a lazy river, it wasn't like rapids or anything, but it was definitely an adventure. And it was super fun. And I think that type of experience started to like spark my desire to experience like different elements of that. And so over the years, like that's kind of, I like to kind of go down the rabbit holes of research and find different places and then see like what I can do around there, what there is to see, or, how do you get there? How do you experience it? So yeah, I don't know what the moment was for me, but it was like, I think the interest was always there. It was just a matter of like having the opportunity to begin to connect with that. And then from there, for me, it's always about like curiosity and desire. It's like, that's interesting to me. Like I see a picture of a cabin and I'm like, where is that? I need to
Yeah.
figure out where that is. I will look at the person's hashtags. I will like figure it out and then like go down whatever rabbit hole I need to figure out how to make it happen. Like I'm just a little bit relentless when it comes to things like that. I have a lot of Capricorn in my chart. So I'm like, okay, I'm doing it. I see it. I want it. I'm doing it. And so sometimes that means it's more adventurous than other times. And I think that's really fun. There's like an aliveness to having that like full immersion in
Yeah.
nature,
Yeah.
which isn't all the time what I want, but is definitely something that is intriguing to me. And so I kind of go there.
Even when it's really hard or scary, sometimes that's when I feel most alive, when I am
Yeah,
forced to really like be present. You have no choice
totally.
but to be in that moment. You're not thinking about anything else. And I feel like those moments most often come to me when I'm in nature. Do you have any
Hmm.
favorites that you'd like to
Mm.
share? I know sometimes keeping these
Okay.
things. Yeah. Okay.
So, well, I haven't been to yours yet, so I'm sure it'll be a favorite. So I definitely need to visit one day. It's on my list because your place looks like the definite, like you said, a PhD in cozy. Like you have it. It is it. Like I literally can't. Like you have checked all the boxes of all. Dog, hot tub,
Dog.
fire.
Yes.
Yeah, dog's
Yeah.
always first. I always have to cross check everything with dog first.
Totally agree.
Um, so favorite cabins is that?
Or no, just favorite adventure nature travels
Oh,
that you've taken. It could be a cabin, it could be a treehouse that you canoe to, it could be whatever.
I mean, okay. So I feel like there's like a high low spectrum to this. Like one are literally, and I'm not just saying this just to be like, oh, it can be easy, but like my sunrise sessions that I do at the beach locally, those are super accessible. Like in the winter, even actually, surprisingly, I do them a lot more often because sunset is a little bit later. My schedule's not as crazy. Um, but having those little micro adventures near my home, going to the beach for sunrise and like scoping out the wildlife, seeing if I can see some coyotes super early and stuff like that. Cause that's kind of, I don't know, weirdly what I like to do. Um, I love doing that. Like that is something that is super meaningful and something that I jump out of bed to go do. So I love that, those little micro adventures near me. And that was not something that I always had living where I live. Like I said, like I had to sort of like cultivate that by just again following that curiosity and being like, what's the feeling? Where can I feel that? Let me go check these things out. So there's that. There's like the local micro adventures I love. And then I was just in Iceland and
Mm.
did a 5-day hut to hut trek through the highlands of Iceland. We did, and I'm probably butchering this name, the Luigvagar Trail through the highlands. And like we had some Icelandic weather. It was like pretty windy, raining. We might have seen like sleet for a little second there. But it was absolutely incredible. Like, I don't know. Have you been there? Have you been to Iceland
No,
before?
no, it's on
Okay.
my list.
Okay. I feel like for a lot of people, it's very high on their list. And then there's some people like my husband who are like, no thanks. I mean, maybe
Really?
he'll want it, not no thanks, but like he doesn't really want to go. He wouldn't like be like, yes, I'm signing up for like cold wind and rain.
Right.
You know what I
Fair
mean?
enough.
Which I'm
On
like,
paper,
hey,
it doesn't sound great.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No. We'll go and do like a van tour of like the whole country, which I think would be super cool. But Iceland was incredible. Like when you look at photos of areas of Iceland and you're like, that looks out of this world. Like I kid you not, that's exactly what it looks like. I started crying. I was like, This is the photo. This is why I'm here. Like, this is literally, I saw a photo on Google Image and was like, I'm going there. And
Yeah.
that was exactly what I saw. And it was so beautiful, so incredible. The people are super nice. Like,
I've heard that.
it's, yeah, they're really nice. And the trail we did anyway, it was over 5 days. So it was like 46 miles. We saw so many different types of terrain. There was like
Mm.
all the different lava fields and obsidian fields, and there was like lush green. There was sand, like a black sand desert. I mean, it was like wild. The terrain is just absolutely the definition of wild. And I loved it. I didn't want to leave. I wanted to keep hiking. Like, I'm definitely going back. That was yeah, super high on my list of those types of nature experiences.
Okay, this is very selfish of me because Sean and I are both turning 40 this year. And so we're like, we should plan a trip, like a 40th trip. So
Mm.
just this weekend, we started making a list. I'm going to add Iceland to it. Anything
Do
else we
it.
should add to it? Because I really
Mm.
want it to be outdoorsy. He is a little bit, he will backpack with me, but he's a little bit more like, it doesn't have to be that rigorous for it to be enjoyable.
Yeah.
So,
Well, we did, and I haven't like done tons of like international travel. Like, I'm not like world traveler type person, like actually by any means. I feel like more, I do a lot more like regional type,
well,
adventure
we're
type
thinking
trips. Like,
nationally or domestically, potentially,
oh,
like
okay.
Montana, Wyoming. So
Ooh,
anything you have.
Montana and Wyoming are very high on my list as well. Cause as I
Okay.
said, I'm like a wildlife crazy person. Like, I,
Yeah.
I want to go to Montana and wake up at like 2 a.m. or anytime they tell me to try to watch like wolves. Like, that is like
Yeah.
a huge bucket list dream thing for me, is like spotting wolves. I don't know how I
Yeah.
do that, but I'm pretty sure there's people who know how to do that, and you hire them, and I would love to do that.
Or one of those
So,
cabins where they, like, come to that giant I mean, obviously, this is all over
oh,
Instagram, but
yeah.
those, I'm like, "I can't even handle it." You're cozy inside, and they're just, like, right there.
I've seen that, and I was like, I think it's, is it in like a, I don't know if it's in like a wildlife refuge. There's definitely
I have no
something.
idea.
I was like also unsure. Yeah, I've seen that, and then I'm like, wait, or I hope these animals aren't like basically in a zoo. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I don't know,
Yeah.
but yeah,
Because it looks
wolves high on
wild,
the
but then
list.
you're like, "This isn't exactly what wild wolves would be doing."
Yeah, like, why are they coming up to the house? Usually they're very like evasive and like not
Yeah.
up right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, that definitely going to Wyoming or Montana's high on the list. I mean, Iceland was incredible. We also went to my husband and I went to Portugal last year and rented a van and drove
Mm.
the Algarve coast. It was in November, which is like it's just definitely off season. It's getting to be a little colder, but it was beautiful. Still went swimming in the ocean, like still wore short sleeves some of the time. And that was like so beautiful and a very good combo of like nature and like going into towns or
Yeah.
starting and
Hmm.
stopping in Lisbon or something like that. There's this trail called the Rota Vicentina. I might be getting that wrong, but it's this like, I don't know, 1 or 200 mile trail that basically goes along the coast. So as we drove every day, like while my husband was like kiteboarding or whatever, and I was like just wanting to do a little hike, I would just like pick up part of the trail and just like go for a couple miles. And it's like super easy, and it's all like coastal hiking, which is very different than like,
Yep.
up in the mountains in the woods.
Yep.
So beautiful though. So it almost looked like and I could be, I don't know, someone might be like, this is not at all what it looks like. But to me, it reminded me of like a California coast with like the huge bluffs and like big cliffs over the ocean. It was like kind of that vibe.
That's
So
just what I was picturing in my head when you said that.
yeah.
Like, when you're driving down, I think it's Route 1. No, that's the East Coast. Anyway, when you're driving down the coast of California,
Yes.
that's what it makes me okay, this might be a good place for you to plug your upcoming trip because you actually
Sure.
organize group trips. Can you tell me a little bit about
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. So, again, kind of following that little breadcrumb of curiosity, like I'm always wanting to expand my experience and immersion in nature. And that sort of led me to hosting group hiking related nature focused trips. So the Iceland trip I did back in September, there were 16 women who came with me and we hiked this trail. And so what I just shared about that. But coming up in May, the next trip is hiking the Salcantay Trail to Machu Picchu in Peru. So it'll be 5 days. Again, it's hut to hut, which, if you haven't gathered by now, is like kind of something that I like to do, are staying in like huts and cabins and like those types of rustic off-grid type accommodation. Although these are like, there might not be electricity, but like one of them is like a glass igloo. We're staying in Andean huts, jungle domes, like really cool, funky, uh, unique places to that area. And it'll be a 5-day hike through the mountains and all different types of ecosystems of the mountain range there to Machu Picchu and ending in Machu Picchu. So like a fairly challenging trip, but definitely an adventure. And I know a huge bucket list item for me and for so many people is visiting Machu Picchu. And I generally like to do things where I feel like they're a little bit like off the beaten path a little bit. Not that this trail is unknown by any means, but it's definitely less populated than the Inca Trail, which a lot of people know of. And we'll have local guides, we'll have porters, handling most of our gear that we'll be bringing with us, carrying a day pack. And really, these types of trips are just great opportunities to connect with nature, go somewhere incredible, and really be immersed in it. Like you're waking up in nature. You're not like in a, Howard Johnson hotel and then taking a bus, seeing nature and then getting back on a bus. And there's nothing wrong with that for sure. Like do whatever you want and whatever works. Like there's a time and a place for that. But there's something about not entering and exiting nature over and over to like be fully immersed for like a 5-day period with local people, being fed and cooked local food, and having the opportunity to connect really closely with the people that you're hiking with through the exciting and fun and beautiful and incredible epic times, but also like the times that can be kind of challenging and like where you need to kind of like dig in and find that grit that you have in you somewhere. There's really like a sense of connection that happens with people when they connect over something that is like a little bit challenging sometimes.
Yeah.
And maybe that's like the masochist in me. I don't know. I love to like have that little bit of challenge that gives me like the gratitude and like the reverence for that experience, and know that it's something that like I did for myself and that I could really like overcome a little bit of something, whether that's a little bit of fear or, and just knowing that like you did something challenging that maybe not everyone would be willing to do. And you feel so much better afterwards. So there's the connection to nature, there's the connection and learning about yourself. And then there's a connection to like-minded people in this really like close, immersed experience that to me is just like why I love doing these things. So that's happening in May.
And that's
12th
what makes
to the
your
19th.
trips different, I think. Because I've looked at group trips before I've looked at group trips to Iceland. I've looked at group trips to go to Machu Picchu. And it's always the kind that you describe where it's like we have picked out the hotels and then we've booked the bus trip. And like, that's great. And again, great for a lot of people. But I was always craving something like, how do I actually do the backpacking? How do I do the work? And that's sometimes like really hard to get the information for that. It is.
Yeah.
I was telling my husband because I was starting to look at backpacking trails in Montana, and I was just like, planning backpacking trips is logistically really challenging because there's just like so many pieces and so many different routes. So then to have a group trip that is that kind of experience that you still don't have to plan all the details. It's why I was so tempted by your Iceland trip and why I'm so tempted by the trip in May. I don't know if I could do 2 big trips, but I'm like selfishly like, can I do one with him and then do this one? Because my 40th is in April. So I'm like, maybe this is what I do for my 40th.
Yeah. Pre-birthday trip.
Yeah. I love what you're
post-birthday trip.
Post-birthday. Yeah. I love what you're saying about the connection though. And I wonder, obviously as a cabin owner, and a lot of the folks listening are cabin owners, I'm wondering how those either building a cabin or actively hosting in a cabin can be mindful of the connection piece, helping guests connect to the outdoors and nature, helping guests connect to themselves, and then helping guests connect with others, whether that's folks who are in their group or just others in that community. Do you have any tips from trips you've been on before about what we as owners and hosts could do to encourage that type of connection, not just for ourselves, but also for the people staying at our cabins?
Yeah. I think from the perspective of someone who is, and I'm not this person who owns a cabin, or from the person who's visiting a cabin, who I've been that person many times, is maybe asking the question, like, how can I cultivate a meaningful experience? Like, what does it mean to cultivate a meaningful experience? And as a cabin owner, I would imagine this would be answered differently for every cabin. It has to be true to you. It has to be true
Yeah.
to the type of people you want to attract. It has to be true to maybe your why. And that is what's going to shine through in the build, in the little details, and in the marketing too. Because as someone, my background is also in marketing and PR and social media and things like that. So like my brain always goes to the marketing direction as well. And I think if you're looking to attract people who also want to have a meaningful experience, you have to market your product in a meaningful way. You have to help open the awareness of what those touch points of meaning and connection and grounding are in your space, so that when someone comes across your feed, comes across a post or your website or whatever, your aligned people are going to see it and connect with it right away. And so I think honestly, that's a little bit different. It would be different what those meaningful things are for each cabin owner. But like, I mean, I think some obvious things are like, you know, having it feel really close to nature, whether it is actually remote in nature or you bring like elements of nature like into the home, or big windows. Like I know with your cabin, I can't remember if you decided to do blinds or not, but you were like really anti the blinds. Did you
We
end up
did
doing
do
blinds?
them. They're
Okay.
very low key. We've had guests complain that we don't have blinds in the bedroom, and I'm like, actually, they're there. That's how low profile they are.
Yeah. Okay. So like things like you, for instance, put so much thought into those types of things because they matter. Those are the types of things that people might not, okay, maybe they notice if they're looking for a blind and they can't find one, but it's the feeling people feel when they access a space that matters more than like, actual things.
Yeah.
Because and it's like those little things, those little shifts that really make a big difference, I think. And then being able to show those through like feeling and energy and emotion through your marketing too,
Yeah.
are going to bring in like the right people. So I don't know if that answers your question exactly, but that's kind of the way I think about it.
Yep. So it sounds like there's 3 steps here. Step 1 is know your people. Know who you want to attract to your cabin really clearly. And we've talked about this in past episodes, and there was an Instagram live we did with Anime Tonkin who talks about business model, and I think it's really helpful for Airbnbs and rentals to be thinking about what is the business model I'm trying to create here. And yes, that sounds very like money driven, but I actually think that goes back to most importantly, who are you trying to attract? And then how do you set up a space
Mm-hmm.
that really makes their experience great? So step 1, know your people. Then step 2, design your space really intentionally for those people. But
Yes.
then step 3 is communicate the ways in which you've designed your space for those people. Because I'm just reflecting now
Yes.
and I'm like, I've put so much time into our guest book because the people that I built our cabin for are people who like to travel, be cozy, and connect with nature, and who are planners and don't want to do the planning. So those are my people.
Mm-hmm.
So I put together this intense guest book that could help them do all those things without having to do any planning. So their only job is to just relax. But I don't
Mm.
talk about that very often on social media. So the communication piece isn't there. How am I going to attract those people if I don't talk
Mm.
regularly about how we aim to take the planning off your plate, which I don't, right? So I think if I'm hearing you, I think those
Yeah.
are the 3 steps.
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of like parallels to what I was saying about like my group trips, for instance, is I'm doing something that's like a little more difficult than getting on a bus from a hotel. And like, but I'm not trying to say to the people who want to take a bus to a hotel, but you might also like this. I mean, they might, but I'm not trying to convince anyone at the same time, because if that doesn't feel like that's aligned for you, then maybe I'll do a trip like that in the future and that could be for you. Or maybe there are a lot of other
Other
people
trips.
out there doing things like that. Yeah. So it's being very clear about what it is it's not
Mm,
just what you offer, but it comes from the place of like what you care about. You know what I mean?
yes.
So
Yes.
when you're talking about what you care about, that is you marketing to that person.
Yeah.
You're going to be directly speaking to that person. It's when we start to waver a little bit because we're like, well, we don't want to disclude you over here. Well, maybe this too.
Yes.
Then we start getting a little dancey, a little wishy-washy, and people are like, I don't know, there's something kind of fishy up with what she's talking about. And I'll go back to it.
And there's a saying, and I think it comes from a marketing book I read somewhere, but it's like, if you talk to everyone, you're talking to no one, because it's
For sure.
impossible to talk to everyone. So knowing your people, you have to talk to those people. Because like the
Mhm.
last thing you want is someone who would prefer a bus trip to be on day 3 of an overnight hike to
Yeah,
Machu Picchu and be like, I'm out, I can't do this. And you're like, well, there is no exit route. like,
exactly.
and so
Exactly.
that's
But who I
why.
but who I am speaking to is the woman who's never done a trip like this, but had the desire and the curiosity to. And I'm speaking to, hey, you don't need to have done this before. You don't need to be an avid backpacker. You just need to have, like in one of my Instagram posts recently, I said the prerequisite is desire, not experience.
I like
Like
that.
if you desire this and you're up for it and you're ready for it, it's for you. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So similar parallel to that.
Yeah, it's and I think sometimes it's what you don't offer too, because I'm thinking again of something I don't talk about very often is we don't have a TV in the cabin and that's by
Yeah.
choice. And
Yep.
that could be bad if we end up with someone there during football season who's really upset that they miss Sunday football, right? Like that would not
Mhm.
be ideal. But our
Mhm.
people might love Sunday football, but are fine taking a weekend off and just checking the scores on their phone and like reading a book by the fire. But if I don't communicate that enough, then I'm going to end up getting guests who really care about watching Netflix at night and can't do
Mhm.
that. And so I think
Mhm.
it's also like managing in a way that clear marketing is managing expectations
Mhm.
for not your people.
Exactly. Like I feel like you could easily do, and I'm surprised if you haven't already, but like do a whole reel about like why you don't have a TV. And I bet you'd get bookings from that because people would be like, I agree with you. I'm that type of person too. Now I really want to come. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like
Yeah.
not because it's not because you don't have a TV, it's because they believe in what you believe in.
Yeah, I think a good example of this for anyone out there who wants to see this done really well, Lauren and Cam at Fort Treehouse are undergoing a big rebrand right now because they're launching a new tree house hotel. Like it's like a mini hotel. It's amazing. They have the renderings up. They look insane. But what's been so notable about their rebrand on Instagram is that it was only a couple days ago. It's been going on for like a month, and it was only a couple days ago that I saw the actual renderings. And I was blown away by them, but I was invested before I ever saw the renderings. It wasn't
Mm,
about the space, it was about what they believe and what they're
yes.
trying to bring to people about that connection to nature. And all of their messaging is around that. So if you want to see this done really well, now is a really good time to look up. I think it's Fort Treehouse Co. on Instagram. And you'll see just visually and in like read their captions. I think it is a brilliant example of what we're talking about.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So since we pivoted to marketing, which was next on my list of things, because
I
you and
love
I
it.
have messaged a bit about marketing and I really value your opinion on that. And I know that a lot of our listeners who do rent their cabins, that is just a necessary evil, or not evil, but just I really like the way you talked about it because it doesn't sound evil at all. It's just about communication. But as an observer who I'm sure follows a lot of cabin accounts, I would be curious to hear from your perspective who's doing it really well and some examples that
Mm.
folks can look to, and what are some of the biggest missed opportunities you see?
Ooh, that's a great question. Okay. So actually, this reminds me, I think when I first got on Instagram, like in 2012 or something, I think cabin porn was one of my first accounts I ever followed. And to be honest, are they still around? I
Yeah.
don't even
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
I'm sure they are. Okay.
Yeah.
And I think honestly, that was like, at that time, it was like, social media in that way was new.
Yep.
So seeing all of the variety of types of cabins and like different types of places to experience was really intriguing to me. So that's kind of a side note.
So you've
But
seen a lot of change from cabin porn
yeah,
being one of the first and
yeah. Oh,
biggest
yeah.
to now the last 11 years, how much it's changed. So you have a really
Yeah.
good perspective and you're a
Yeah.
marketing expert. Okay. I'm
Yeah.
excited to hear
Yeah.
your thoughts.
Okay. So I'm not just saying this, but I love yours. I think you do such a good job, and for a number of reasons. One is you aren't afraid and you bring to the forefront the personal element of your brand and your cabin and your business. And I know you know that that works because obviously it does. But I think there's so much to that. And maybe not every personality wants to do that. And I think it can work without doing that. If you don't want to and it feels really uncomfortable, then maybe it isn't for you.
Yep.
I'm not saying everyone has to, but don't be afraid to try it, to bring your actual face into your business, because people, again, everything I do and everything I think of it from a marketing perspective comes back to connection and feeling like a sense of like you feel aligned with that person or that business. So like for you, when you're talking on your Instagram pretty often and you show your face, people connect with you and they like you, and you happen to have this incredible Airbnb that is like, you know, top notch. People are going to feel really comfortable and really ready to book and experience your property, not only because of pretty pictures, but because, again, they connect with you, they like you, they trust you, they believe in what you believe in, they've heard your voice and your what's the word? Like I can't think of the word, but like the way you feel about certain things, they feel that come through. So I think that is like
point of
something
view
you
or
do.
perspective.
Yeah, or like your passion behind certain things. Like you want people to be able to connect.
Yeah.
Like I feel like on Instagram, if we're talking Instagram specifically, like pretty pictures go a long way. And for some accounts, I'm sure they go very far. And I think there has to be like an element of connection to it beyond just a pretty picture. And if that's not your face and you speaking to the camera and connecting human to human, like maybe it's like softening up some of the marketing in using some video or like showing people specific spaces and using words and storytelling to evoke an emotion around why you created that nook. Like, is that because when you grew up, your grandmother had a nook that she read you a book in? Like people want to hear that. They don't just want the pretty picture of a perfectly curated aesthetic nook. You know what I mean? Like that gets you far, but it could get you a lot farther. You might get people who love your brand, not just are willing to come stay.
That's right. Passionate followers. And I feel like that is the differentiator of short-term rentals or Airbnbs specifically versus hotels. Because with a hotel, we don't necessarily know the human. And sure, it helps if the person at the desk is nice to us just because it makes the stay better. But we're not going there because we care about their perspective, versus Airbnbs has always been about the local perspective and how that can impact your stay in a positive way. So if they don't hear that from you, then it might as well just be a pretty hotel.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And so like I would say from like a consumer and a marketer perspective, like don't be afraid to be a little less polished in the name of connection. And I think that goes for like any brand, whether it's a personal brand, a company, like whatever it is, there's definitely a fine vulnerability line that like people can cross, and it can be a little bit of like energetic dumping. Like nobody needs that. We don't need like people's kind of messiness on the internet. Like
there's a tricky line.
There's a line, but I think like I always come back to like, is this going to help me connect? Is someone going to relate to this? Is someone going to feel seen by this? And if the answer is yes, then like that's probably a safe thing to share. That isn't self-serving and that isn't like useless waste of people's time.
I think Spencer of Retreat at Fall Branch Falls, do you follow him? I think he's a good example of this too. Now, his cabin is beautiful and he takes beautiful pictures of it, but his grid to me doesn't feel as polished as some others. It's not like, I get the impression that when he's posting when he has something to say that matters to the people who follow him, not I'm posting this picture because it matches nicely with the one next to it. And I think there's something beautiful about that. And clearly he has like almost 100,000 followers. So clearly I think that's working. But if you just look at his grid, it's not the same as I can think of some examples, but like perfectly curated grids that don't have a message. His, you just feel like you get to know him and his family through, he's on camera sometimes, but not all the time, but through text or captions, he does a really good job of that.
Yeah. Another account that I have been following recently that's newer, that is beautifully aesthetic, but also connects to my desire to be close to nature is Lumen Camps. Do you know Lumen?
No.
Have you heard of that one?
Nope.
I need to double check if that's their actual handle. They are in the White Mountains area of New Hampshire. Lumen Camps.
Yep. Found them.
And
Okay.
they are like these little Nordic style cabins that are in the
Beautiful.
woods, and they have a sauna, and like they just do like such a beautiful job of kind of reconnecting everything back to the nature element, which seems to be kind of their core message. And that happens to be mine too. So I'm very like
Yeah.
aware of that. So I really love that. I think yeah, honestly, I think there are so many. So because I tend to also go to a lot of these sort of like not necessarily on Instagram, off grid type places
Yeah.
that I find by way of really random ways. Um, there are so many there's so many cabins or accounts that I feel like just do not show almost anything, but certainly don't show like the incredible beauty and like experience. Like there's, and I get for a lot of people, marketing is like on the back burner if they're not a marketer or if they are so busy with all of the other things that take running the business,
Mhm.
if it's even their primary business. But I feel like there are so many like cabin accommodation type accounts that like just really undersell themselves because they just don't post very much. When they
Mm.
do, like the photo is like kind of meh. But then if you go down a rabbit hole, you might find a good one. Or if you go there yourself, you're like, oh my God, this is like so great. So like, I also feel like there's a lot of, as for as many cabin accounts as there are, I feel like there are also a lot that don't do a lot of posting. And I don't know, maybe they get plenty of business, I guess. But there are definitely some places I've been to where I'm like, oh my God, I would never have thought it would look like this. And then you get there and you're like, what the hell?
That's such a good way to phrase it because it feels so positive to me that they're underselling. Like this assumption that like you have a great place. You just need to figure out what are the pieces that other people think are beautiful. I think Alexis from Kingdom A-Frame, her basement of the A-Frame I had never seen. And then all of a sudden one day she posted a picture and I was like, "Alexis, you have a basement? It's awesome. Why haven't you shared this more?" So underselling, just understanding that
Yeah.
like you have priorities, but what might an outsider really value that you're not thinking about? And that's just
Mm-hmm.
the physical space. But also to your point, what are the surroundings? What are the things that people can experience when they're there
Mm-hmm.
too? Yeah.
Yeah. And one of my, and this, I think there's a variety of reasons that this could be the case, but one of my favorite places to go are the Appalachian Mountain Club, high mountain huts in New Hampshire and the camps that you ski into in Maine.
Yes.
And there is almost no information about what to expect, how to get there. There, and I get Appalachian Mountain Club. I love them. I'm a member. I love their places and everything.
Yeah.
But it has been quite a journey to feel like I totally understand how to plan a trip to their camps and their cabins, what I need to pack, what to expect when you get there. Like there's just a very lack of information. And I think that's because they kind of handle a lot of like that's a huge, organization. But that is one experience that I love a lot. And I wish they shared more resources
Yeah.
as to how
To
people
make it
can
more
experience
accessible.
them, to make them more accessible. Yeah, which is what I try to do a little bit like through my Instagram and stuff. And I'm actually curious how you feel about this even personally too, like when to share things and when not to,
Mm.
like geotagging. We don't have to get super deep into that conversation, but there's a couple places I've been to recently that I'm not sure if I'm going to share exactly what or where they are. And I have a few different reasons why, but I also want to make sure that those aren't like ego reasons, that they're like actual, yeah, I don't know, that they're reasons that protect the place or the people that might be trying to access the place.
Yes.
So, do you have any thoughts on that? I'm very curious.
I actually do feel like that's worth talking about only because I think one, until someone brought it up on Instagram a couple years ago, and it was around fall and it was about geotagging these places where there's beautiful fall leaves and then they just get swarmed with tourists. And I had literally never thought about it before. And I always tagged the location of everything because I was just like, this is how you get found. This is helpful for people who are seeing it. There's like a bunch of reasons to do it. But now the way I approach it with our cabin is that when I find out insider stuff. So for example, I was up at the cabin last weekend and a local who we've met through Instagram, we went out hiking and she showed me these great local trails. They're owned by someone, so they're not like fully public, but like he lets everyone in the area walk on them. And that was a moment where I was like, I will never post about this on Instagram,
Mm-hmm.
but I will put it in our guest book because we only ever host 2 people at a time. So at the very most, the only impact I'm having on that trail are 2 people during their
Mhm.
visit who might go on that trail. And the guy who owns it, I think, is okay with that. Like that's what he has maintained the trails for. So I always think about the difference. Well, I guess there's 3 levels. What I don't share about at all is just for me. What I share with guests in our guest book when they're there, and what I might share on Instagram. And I think my
Mhm.
bar for what I will share on Instagram is typically businesses and businesses only, because most businesses you can buy as much as you want and it doesn't impact anyone else and it helps that business owner. But usually they're small local businesses.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Like for instance, there was a few weeks ago, I went to like a fire tower and like if someone wants to Google it, they could find it. There's only like 8 parking spots. It's first come, first serve. There's no water up there. You have to hike everything up. Like yeah,
Oh, I
like that
followed
was
your adventure. I saw
okay.
that. And I literally was like, "Where is this? Can I go there? This is
Well, I'll
amazing."
tell you. I mean, and a couple people messaged me and I, told them one on one, but I felt like it would be maybe a little irresponsible to just blow it up for the sake of blowing it up because like you said like this isn't someone's business
Right.
it's not boosting anyone's economy and there isn't water up there. Like I wouldn't want like someone to try to experience this that might not be prepared for this. And
Yes.
also there's very limited parking spots. So like it can't accommodate a ton of people.
Yeah.
But then again, like if someone Googles it, they could probably find it. Like that's what I do. I go
Yeah.
down crazy rabbit holes of Googling. That's part of the fun of it. Honestly, some of the time, I'd rather not
You
every
are a
time someone just
masochist.
hand me the IT. Yeah, like there's some fun to that as well. Is like knowing that you discovered the adventure. And then last week we were at a really cool hip camp that is kind of one of those examples of like almost no Instagram presence, not one that you would realize the product doesn't match the marketing, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, well, this one's a little trickier because this is someone's business. They make money off of people booking. However, it's like one camping spot. I've never seen a view like this at like a private camping spot in this area. So I was like, and I'm sure others exist, but I've never seen anything like it before. I know I would like to go back and not have it be booked up all the
Yeah.
time. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
definitely a little selfish, but I don't know if I'm going to share that one because of that reason. It's such a limited resource,
Yeah.
but I want to be able to help the people who have this as a business too,
Yeah.
So it's tricky.
That's where it's not super black and white. And I think really it just the responsibility is on anyone posting to just think through the impact. And like
Yeah.
really like not just for like 30 seconds, but like sit down and be like, okay, who could this benefit and who could it not benefit? And that's where if I decide that it's almost all benefit and no downside, then I'll tag the shit out of it because I
Yeah.
love promoting, especially in Freeport. I love promoting Freeport based businesses, female run businesses in Maine. Like I love that stuff. And so I will always, always tag it. But when it comes to like nature stuff where no one's benefiting from, well, the individuals are benefiting if they can go, but if excessive influx of people could actually damage the experience for the
Mhm.
locals
Mhm.
or can damage the actual nature by too much demand, then I think those are the times where I'll just be
Yeah.
like, I might still share it with guests, although there have been some where I don't share with guests either because the locals feel pretty strongly about that. But if it's, because we have only 2 guests at a time and none of them or very few of them live locally, it doesn't feel like a big impact
Mhm.
there.
Yeah. And I feel like too, you kind of maybe said this a little bit earlier, but like if someone were to give me the intel and it feels like it's their private intel that they don't share publicly, I probably wouldn't share it publicly either, just out of respect for them trusting me with their
That's right.
info.
Yeah, but I do think for hosts that it's important to think about that. And if you're sharing it in your guest book with only guests and you don't want them sharing it publicly, I do think it's worth mentioning in the guest
Mm.
book, please don't tag this location. Feel free to share photos, but please don't explicitly and even say like this is insider local info. We're sharing it with you as a guest only. And I think one that can make guests feel like, great, this is the point of Airbnb to have a local showing me
Totally.
those things. But then like to your point, when you feel like someone has shared that with you, you'll be more respectful of it. But I do think it's worth saying explicitly because otherwise
Mhm.
there's no expectation of privacy. People will post and people will tag. So
Mhm.
yeah,
Totally.
for stuff like that. Meredith, this was great.
This has been so fun. I love it.
I really feel like personally, thank you, I have gotten a lot out of this in terms of mindset shifts and small things I can do when I'm not at the cabin, and also a couple travel ideas. I'm going to chew on the Machu Picchu trip and get back to you on that. We have to decide if we're going to do a together one or not, but I love the trips that you're organizing. Oh, one more thing you do that I do think goes back to what we talked about at the beginning. Can you just plug real quick the I think they're mindfulness tracks that you create?
Yeah, so I have a free walking meditation that people can download. So it's just on my website. You can click there, and it's a 20-minute free walking meditation, and you can literally do it whether you're walking down like your neighborhood street, again, because we can connect to nature anywhere, or if you're in the woods, whatever. It's just a really great like touch point into nature that you can put in your ears for 20 minutes, go for a walk without, I always say, like, going for a mindfulness walk in nature without your dog, without a podcast. You're not talking to a friend. You're not talking on the phone. It's just you connecting with nature. So that's a free resource that I have. And if you're in Rhode Island or near Rhode Island, I actually just today launched the Rhode Island Hiking Club. It's a free community that anyone can join. And we'll be doing casual meetups. We have a Rhode Island group hike in November that just booked out within like an hour this morning.
Awesome.
So there'll be more kind of things like that, but really just like, a way to get like-minded people together to enjoy the outdoors.
I love that. I do feel like it can be really hard to make friends as adults, and doing it through adventure, in my experience, has been the best way. And some of my best friends to this day came from my climbing community when I was in my 20s. So I love that you're doing that. Can you tell people where to find you? This will be in the show notes, and on the YouTube version, I'll put it on the screen. But just for folks listening, where can they find you?
Sure. My website is meredithewenson.com. My Instagram is at Meredith Ewenson. So you can pretty much find everything you need there.
Perfect. Thank you so much. It was really great chatting with you.
This was so great.
Thanks so much for joining us. And if you liked what you heard, feel free to leave us a 5-star rating on Spotify or share some of your favorite parts over on Apple Podcast. If you have feedback or suggestions for the future, you can also find me on Instagram at Cozy Rock Cabin. Looking forward to next week.